For years, we have been told of one mythology, that Nika is the liberator, that the clan of D carry the inherited will, and during the Void Century, the good guys ended up losing. Within chapter 1182, we had the reveal of a second mythology. This is the perspective that the characters we've been following are in fact the monsters. The celestial dragons have their own folklore and horror stories, as well as their very own gods. From their point of view, everything that we've been rooting for, which includes Nika's smile, the D-clan's defiance, and the promise of liberation, this is literally nightmare fuel for them. Bedtime stories of Nika and the D-clan's defiance were told to scare children into obedience. Oda's been planning the mythology of the celestial dragons for over 23 years, and he mentions this within content that a lot of us skim through. Do you know who doesn't get scared of bedtime stories featuring Nika and the D-clan? These are the individuals who are subscribed to the channel. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy these One Piece breakdowns, then hit the bell notification and the subscribe button for even more content just like this. Within chapter 1182, while Loki was still clashing with Imu on the battlefield, combining lightning from his Nidhogg form with Ragnir's ice abilities, hammering away at Imu who was tanking everything that was thrown at him, Zoro and Sanji were literally picking themselves back up after Imu had one-shotted both of them in the previous chapters. Killingham used his Kidion Devil Fruit to create his most powerful MMA yet. He pulls from his own consciousness Zaza, the rain goddess. This is a deity that the celestial dragon children have been hearing horror stories about since they could walk. The chapter also confirmed Ragnir's devil fruit, the Risu Risu no Mi model Rototska, the mythical ice squirrel from Norse mythology that runs up and down Yggdrasil carrying messages between the eagle at the top and the dragon at the roots. The focal point of this chapter is Zaza and her design. She's a woman with long hair and 4 arms. Her body is completely transparent and you can see water churning inside her like she's made of a living ocean. She wears a robe and a conical hat decorated with hanging jewels, and her face is hidden behind a veil that reveals only her eyes. On her back sits a white ring almost identical to the halo that we've seen on Imu, except Zaza's ring doesn't have the eyes. When Zaza appears, she floods an entire village, and when Killingham called Summers on the Denden Mushi to tell him what he had done, Summer states that a creation like that would terrify even them, the Holy Knights. This is where we learn that the Holy Knights grew up in the Holy Land above the rain clouds. Celestial Dragon kids were told 3 frightening stories. First, there was the story of Nika, the entity whose smile twists people into disobedience. For the readers of One Piece, we refer to Nika as freedom, but to a celestial dragon child raised in the domain of the gods, Nika is an infection that spreads chaos through the lower world. Second is the story of the D-clan, the bloodline that refuses to die. When you try to exterminate them, they scatter, erase their names from history, and they keep crawling back. Rocinante told us that in the Holy Land, children were warned that if they misbehaved, the D's would come and get them. While this was pretty laughable when we first heard about it, in chapter 1182, it confirms that these fears were ingrained as cultural terror for these kids. And now we have the story of Zaza, a monstrous rain deity from the lower world who covered people's heads with water, appearing to the rhythm of rain rituals. Now this boogeyman had struck deepest with celestial dragons because of where they live. Mary Jo sits on top of the red line above the clouds. The celestial dragons call the entire surface of the planet the lower world, Gekai. They don't experience weather, so rain is something that happens to other people far below. So for a child born above the rain clouds, water falling from the sky onto your head, it's actually cosmologically inverted. It means that the lower world is reaching up into paradise. It's a breach in the walls of heaven. So it's no stretch to say that the celestial dragons fear Zaza the most. Now, Zaza wasn't announced out of nowhere. This reveal connects to something that Oda wrote over 20 years ago. Within chapter 287, released in 2003, titled God Killing, during the Noland flashback on Jaya, the Shandia were dying from tree fever, and they decided to sacrifice the maiden Moose in order to appease their gods. During that ceremony, they called upon 4 deities by title: the Sun God, the Rain God, the Forest God, and the Earth God. They offered Moose's blood to all 4. Nolan appeared and killed the giant snake Kashigami and saved her. Nobody paid much attention to the name of these 4 gods in 2003 as we were in the middle of Skype here. Enel was running around calling himself God, so it was quite easy to overlook the mention of a sun, rain, forest and earth god. When Nolan killed the giant snake, he killed their god. A man from the outside world destroyed the divine order of the island. The Shandians were terrified and furious, and they wanted him dead for what he did. This is pretty similar to what's occurring on Elbaf. The Straw Hat outsiders from the lower world are dismantling the divine order that Emu has maintained for 800 years. Within chapter 1044, we learned that the sun god had in fact a name, and it was Nika. And it seems like Oda has been sat on this since chapter 287. Now chapter 1182 reveals that the rain god also has a name, and it is Zaza. So we have the names of 2 gods. Now what could the other 2 gods be named? This is where we dive into Oda's hidden naming convention. The sun god's name Nika is not from any existing mythology, Greek, Norse or Hindu. It's a Japanese onomatopoeia, the sound effect for a cheeky toothy grin. When a manga character flashes a big smile, the sound effects next to their name is Nika. Oda named the sun god after the sound of a smile. Zaza is the Japanese onomatopoeia for heavy torrential rain. When it pours in manga panels, the sound effect across the page is Za. The rain god is named after the sound of rain. So knowing both god names come from sound effects, this is a naming convention, and if it holds true, which it usually does with Oda, the forest god and earth god will follow a similar rule. So what could the potential names be for the forest god? Candidates include Zawa Zawa, which is the rustling of leaves, or Sawa Sawa, which is softer rustling. There is also Gasa Gasa, which is the sound of rustling through underbrush. For the earth god, you could consider Go Go Go, which is the menacing rumble that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fans know all too well. There's also Do Do Do, which is trembling earth, and Gura Gura, which is shaking. The last one connects directly to Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi, the earthquake devil fruit. In chapter 100, Monkey D. Dragon's first appearance at Logtown, we saw a massive rainstorm. The sound effect across those panels is Za, the exact sound Zaza is named after. Dragon's debut is drenched in the rain god's name. If we're right about this naming convention, then the forest god and earth god's names are hiding somewhere within Oda's sound effects. Chapter 1182 does an excellent job of exposing the mythology of the upper world. They recontextualize the very same events that we're familiar with throughout the story, but give us an opposite perspective. The peace of the celestial dragon's holy land is reliant upon keeping the chaos below and paradise above. When Ivankov and subsequently the Revolutionary Army figured out that Mary Jo's position on top of the Red Line was actually a vulnerability, that the city has zero food production and it depends entirely on imports, they then started choking the supply lines. The world nobles began starving. Did anyone actually think that the Holy Land above the clouds was self-sustaining? It instead acts in a parasitic way. Once you take away the labor from the lower realms, the whole system collapses. Doflamingo knew this better than anyone. He grew up within the Holy Land and he left it and got dragged through the dirt of the lower world. But he discovered something in Mary Jo that was so dangerous that the celestial dragons tried to kill him for knowing about it. This is the national treasure. We still don't know what it is, but Doflamingo said that it could shake the world, and he's been blackmailing the world government with it ever since. Whatever the national treasure is, it's something that threatens the mythology, and it proves that the divine right of the celestial dragons is built on a lie. It's said that if this treasure is used in combination with the Opi Opi no Mi, then it would allow the user to effectively conquer the entire world. Whatever this national treasure is, it's highly alluded that Emu is in possession of it. And it seems like he had used it in combination with the Opi Opi no Mi, thus explaining why he has lived for over 800 years, and why he's effectively now conquering the entire world because of this treasure used in combination with the Opi Opi no Mi. The philosophy of Emu, the world government, and Mary Jo, the celestial dragons, has been used as a prototype previously. Enel on Skypia referred to himself as a god and ruled above the clouds. He considered everyone below him to be inferior, and he wanted to go to the moon, which is even higher than everyone else. He also feared nothing in the lower world world until he met Luffy, the future Nika, the one person that was immune to his power. The celestial dragons are Enel's philosophy that has scaled to an entire civilization. In chapter 1138, we learn of the Harley text, an ancient text that contains Elbaf's myths and legends. They are broken down into 3 different worlds. The description of the first world reads, "Within the earth there was fire. Mankind succumbed to greed and touched the forbidden sun. When those who were enslaved prayed, the sun god appeared. The earth god raged, and with its serpent of hellfire shrouded the world in death and darkness. The first world ended by stating they will never meet. The second world is described as, within the void there was breath. The forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war. Those of the half moon dreamed. Those of the moon dreamed. Man killed the sun and became god. And the sea god stormed, and they will never meet. The third world, within the chaos there was emptiness. The inconvenient remnants recall the promised day and hear the voice of the half moon. The sun god dances and laughs, guiding the world to its end. The sun returns and brings a new morning. And the third world ends by saying, and they will surely meet. It's evident that the catastrophe of the first world was fire. The catastrophe of the second world was water. We have a bit of an idea as to what actually happened during the second world. The ancient kingdom fell, the world government was established, sea levels rose dramatically, flooding the land, reshaping the continents, creating the divided world that we see today. The seas rose because of war, and due to the ancient weapons that were fired at the time. Within the Harley, which is a religious retelling, not a historical textbook, these events got linked to the rage of a sea god, the same way that the first world's shattering becomes the work of an earth god. The text is symbolic and it layers divine language over real catastrophic events. So the celestial dragon's fear of a rain god is a memory from the Great Flood. It's as a result of the apocalypse which ended the second world. Their ancestors survived it by ascending, climbing to the top of the Red Line, building Merijo above the weather, and for 800 years they've been making sure that the water can never reach them again. Zaza is the personification of the catastrophe that ended the second world, and this is what Killingham pulled out of his own childhood nightmares. The celestial dragon's mythology is underpinned by the Covenant system, which is an apparatus of control that we learnt about within the Elbaf arc. There are 3 tiers to the Covenant system. The Shallows Covenant is the entry level. Shanks had this as a devoted blade. The tattoo was on his left arm. Those with the Shallows Covenant can disobey Imu when they are far from Merijo, but they are affected the most by it when they are near the Holy Land. About 15 years ago, Shanks returned to Merijo under a plan to gain intelligence on the world nobles. He reunited with Garling and Shamrock and was appointed a devoted blade. But then, while he was inside the Holy Land, he helped Fisher Tiger tear the place apart. Fisher Tiger climbed the Red Line with his bare hands to free the fishmen held as slaves, and Shanks left the armory unlocked so the freed slaves could arm themselves. He cut Tiger's chains and directed him to the weapons. Shamrock was sent to investigate, who left the armory open. Shanks lied straight to his twin brother's face, and together Shanks and Fisher Tiger triggered one of the most significant rebellions in the history of the world government. Boa Hancock, Marigold, Sandersonia Koala, all were freed thanks to the actions of Shanks. The Shallows Covenant is supposed to control you when you're near Merijo. Shanks was at Merijo and he still defied it. Most have assumed that this is because he didn't receive the higher level of the Depths Covenant. When he deserted the devoted blade position, the Gorosei gave his promotion slot to King Harold instead. And then 3 years following this, the Lord of the Coast from chapter 1 of One Piece bit off Shanks' left arm while saving Luffy. This permanently severed the arm that carried the Shallows Covenant tattoo. The Depths Covenant is the next level. It grants immortality, but it enables total control of the recipient's body as they move according to Imu's commands regardless of their own will. And this seems to be the case no matter where they are in the world. King Harold received this level when he refused to conscript Elbaf's warriors into a slave fleet. His body started moving on its own. Imu's orders were literally rewriting his personality. King Harold had to beg his own gods to chain him to a pillar. He then called for Loki and Jarl while he still had some semblance of clarity in his mind left. By the time that they arrived, he was stabbing his own men. He screamed for them to kill him before he killed everyone else, but the immortality kept healing his wounds. The divine authority that the celestial dragons claim isn't metaphorical. Imu is able to literally puppet people through the Covenant. He's able to rewrite who they are. King Harold spent decades pursuing peace, and he was turned into a weapon against his own people because he dared to refuse Imu's orders. Loki was forced to kill his father via a lightning strike from Ragnar. When this happened, Imu suffered backlash following the death. This tells us something important. Killing a Covenant bearer costs Imu something, and that the divine Covenant system has a price. There's also a third and final tier to the Covenant system, and this is the Abyssal Covenant. This is the highest level. Both Depths and Abyssal are restricted to only 13 chosen individuals. We don't know fully what the Abyssal tier grants, but the implications are terrifying. There is also another form of Covenant which Imu uses to invoke within battle against enemies in order to transform them into demons. This is the Demon Covenant, and it's casted via a technique called Domi Reversi. In chapter 1181, Imu stated that the nature of man is to crave strength. When the power they chase is gained too easily, it leads to corruption. When someone chooses servitude out of self-interest, it leads to covenants. And the envy of one who seeks their goal is the power of omen. These three together form the foundation of what he calls domination. Imu offered Loki this power and Loki refused, telling Imu that his system looked more like a deal with the devil than a gift from God. Imu's response was that there's no difference between the two. So this is very telling when it comes to the mythology of the celestial dragons. God and devil are the same thing. Power is power, control is control, and Imu has been exercising both for over 800 years, justifying slavery, genocide, and the erasure of entire civilizations as the natural order, behaving as God, exercising divine right over the lower realm. Now, the counter to Imu's system is Supreme King Haki. Conqueror's Haki counteracts the Divine Covenant. The Roger Pirates proved it by beating back Holy Knights who kept coming for Shanks. Imu's dominance mythology has a weakness, and it's the power of a king who refuses to serve. Zoro, Luffy, and Loki have all demonstrated to have it. 3 Conqueror's Haki users on the same battlefield fighting against Imu, who built his mythology on the idea that everyone's wills belong to him. Oda slipped another detail within chapter 1182. Imu uses an attack called Zizi-Mittel, and this time he's not pulling from Japanese or Norse sources, he's pulling from Aztec mythology. The Zizi-Mime are celestial star demons, skeletal female figures who live in the highest reaches of the sky. During solar eclipses, they descend from the sky to attack and devour the sun. The word Zizi-Mime literally translates to monsters descending from above. Imu descended from the highest point in the world to the Elbaf. He has named his attack after beings whose cosmic purpose is to eat the sun, and Luffy is in fact the sun god. The Zizi-Mime have a dual nature in Aztec belief. They were simultaneously protectors of cosmic order and destroyers who threatened humanity during periods of instability. Their power intensified during the Nimon Temi, the 5 unlucky days at the end of the Aztec calendar cycle. These are periods of cosmic transition when the old order may collapse, and the Aztecs performed human sacrifices specifically to prevent the Zizi-Mime from destroying the sun. If you link this into the story of One Piece, the celestial dragons live in the highest reaches of the sky. They descend to the surface only during extreme cosmic instability, and Imu leaving Merijo is the first time that the situation's been dire enough to warrant it in over 800 years. They are skeletal and demonic. The Gorosei transform into yokai. They then justify human sacrifice, which is slavery, what happened on the Luzia God Valley with the systematic extermination of the Davy bloodline. All of these respective sacrifices are necessary for those who live in the Holy Land to maintain order. Imu knows what he is, as he told Loki in chapter 1181 that there is no difference between a god and a devil. He's been erasing the legacy of Joy Boy for over 800 years, hunting down the D-Clan and destroying anyone who carries the light. The Celestial Dragons are a civilization built on the belief that they are the stars whose function is to keep the sun in check, and Imu is chief amongst the stars who is able to cause a total eclipse of the sun. The 4 gods we learn about within One Piece represent forces that will make the Celestial Dragons' rule impossible. This is what underpins these nightmarish stories that are told to children. The sun god Nika is freedom, uncontrollable laughing defiance that no amount of authority is able to stamp out. You can chain it, erase it, and hunt down everyone who carries its name, but it comes back smiling time and time again. The entire celestial dragon power structure requires obedience. One smile and people start thinking that they deserve to be free. Nika is incompatible with the hierarchy of the celestial dragons. The rain god Zaza is nature reaching into heaven, the lower world breaching the boundary, 800 years of living above the clouds, but somehow rain is still able to reach you, as it's impossible to build a wall against the sky. The earth god, who is still unnamed, is the buried past, everything that the celestial dragons try to erase, which includes the void century, the ancient kingdom, and the truth rotting beneath 800 years of lies. The figure that is most connected to this earth god is Davy D. Jones. The forest god represents life beyond control, growth that happens independently of authority. The Harley says the forest god tamed demons in the second world, and given the connection between devil fruits and the Eve tree, this may reference the very origin of devil fruit powers. Life that mutates, adapts, and spreads without permission. The Eve tree channels sunlight to Fishman Island from its roots, and Mary Jo may sit directly on top of it, meaning the celestial dragons built their paradise on the source of the power that they can't control. If the Eve tree produced the original devil fruits and the forest god governed that process, then whoever currently holds that power is connected to the most destabilizing force in the world of One Piece. So every devil fruit user is a product of the forest god's domain. The celestial dragons have been handing out devil fruits at God Valley as competition prizes, feeding them to slaves for entertainment and hoarding them for their holy nights. They've been treating the forest god's creations as their property while living on top of the tree that bore them. The four forces of the four gods represent freedom, nature, the past, and uncontrollable life. These are the four things that celestial dragons built their entire world to escape from. Their children are raised on nightmares about these gods because each of these forces represents something that makes paradise impossible to maintain. Especially the earth god, which represents buried past. Imu's hatred of the Davy bloodline is personal, and it goes beyond anything else that we've seen from him. On God Valley, when Imu possessed Saturn and confronted Rocks, he didn't call him Zebek, he referred to him as Davy Jones, the same way that he later called Luffy Joy Boy. Imu doesn't see these people as individuals, he sees the inherited will of who they represent from the ancient enemies that he had faced, as they are now just wearing new faces. And when Rocks taunted him by claiming that Davy D. Jones was the first king of the world, Imu lost his composure. He screamed that Jones was never a king for even a moment, and that Rocks had no right to comment on the fate that bound Imu and Davy together. The word bound is interesting. Imu and Davy Jones are connected by something specific. Whatever it is, it hasn't been resolved in over 800 years. The world government announced at God Valley that they had captured members of the Davy clan for the first time in 800 years. Rocks' father and grandmother were in chains. The celestial dragons jeered and cursed at them before releasing them as prey for the native hunting competition. God Valley was a ritualized slaughter, and the primary target was the Davy bloodline. Imu turned Rocks himself into a demon through Domi Reversi and sent him to kill his own wife and son. Kuma saved Eris and young Teach through sheer luck, pushing them away before Imu could see it happen. Blackbeard survived, the son of Rocks, who's now the descendant of Davy D. Jones and the Lord of the Depths. He grew up in the shadows and acquired a fruit that creates darkness and gravitational collapse. This is a power that drags everything downward into the earth, into the abyss. If there's a current earth god candidate, it's definitely the man whose lineage Imu has spent 8 centuries trying to erase, and whose powers are fundamentally about pulling things into the dark. The third world mentioned within the Harley ends with "they will surely meet." After 2 catastrophes which kept the gods apart, the third cycle brings them together. The first world ended in fire, the second in flood, and the third ends in reunion. One thing that has to be remembered about the Harley is that when it says the earth god raged, and with its serpent of hellfire it shrouded the world in death and darkness, it's putting religious language onto what was probably a geological catastrophe, or an ancient weapon being used. We know from the second world that the flooding wasn't caused by an actual sea god. Ancient weapons were fired over and over in a bloody war until the seas consumed most of the land, but in the Harley's retelling that becomes the sea gods stormed. The gods are frameworks that ancient people used to explain cataclysmic events that they couldn't fully comprehend. This makes the celestial dragon's decision to turn these gods into children's nightmares even more revealing. They took the religious framework of their enemies, the mythology of the lower world, and they inverted it into a tool of fear. The gods that the Shandians prayed to for salvation became the monsters that celestial dragon children hide from. The convergence of the gods mentioned within the third world is already happening. Nika is on Elbaf, Nidhogg is on Elbaf, Zaza has been physically manifested on Elbaf. When Emu witnessed Loki's transformation into the Nidhogg dragon, he called the fruit a traitor. Emu has seen this devil fruit before centuries ago. The previous Nidhogg user was the warrior god who fought against Nika, but now the sun gods and warrior gods' current wielders are allies against the same enemy. The mythology of the celestial dragons does have cracks. Gunko is revealed to be Princess Shuri, someone that Brook had previously known. Gunko was able to break free from Emu's possession because her memories of Brook of her past life, they were so strong that they were able to fight through Emu's control as she deactivated her own powers, and then she freed the remaining Straw Hats and told Brook to run before Emu ceased control of her again. Emu was furious at this, not just that she broke free, but that someone from outside was able to reach her, that somebody from the Holy Land would dare to have a connection to the lower world, a human bond that was strong enough to override Emu's divine authority. The celestial dragon's mythology works on a system that depends on separation, heaven above and chaos below, but bonds break through barriers, and Gunko was a perfect example of this. There's also Shanks losing his arm, breaking free from the system, King Harold asking for Loki to kill him rather than becoming a weapon against his own people. Every time that the control system of Emu has been broken, it's because of a bond. Gunko and Brook, Shanks and Luffy, Loki and Harold. In chapter 1179, before descending, Emu laid out every event that keeps him up at night. Rox's promise to return, Roger's execution, Shanks stealing the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Shirahoshi's birth, Loki's devil fruit, Luffy's existence, and the rise of Blackbeard. So there you have it. This is the mythology of the celestial dragons, the complete inverted belief system which Oda has been constructing in parallel with the mythology that we've known for the entire series. We've talked about details from chapter 100 and even 287 which link back to the present day events. It's fascinating to see things from the perspective of the celestial dragons and to theorize what the names of the forest god and earth god could be. But we've now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. Which god do you think is going to get revealed next? Do you agree with the theory about these sound effects naming the different gods? And is there anything that I've forgotten to mention when it comes to the perspective of the celestial dragons and the nightmares that they tell their children? And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.